Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Anisha and thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, we are setting up some book spreads in my reading journal for the books I read back in January. So yes, this video is obviously quite late. I've just been really busy lately. So anyway, let's get into it. If you are new here, I have already posted a reading wrap up for January on my channel. Here is a little glimpse of that setup. This was the cover page for it. You can check out that video on my channel if you're interested. In that wrap up, I created a few spreads, but they were mostly focused on reading status and the overall reading progress. I didn't include any individual book review spreads there, so today we'll be doing just that. The first book I read in January was Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Gamas. For decorating the page, I usually pick out colors from the book cover and use stickers and washi tapes that match those colors. If possible, I also try to incorporate design elements that reflect the theme of the book, though that's not always the case. But this time I was able to bring in some thematic elements. So you can see here the chemistry inspired design on this paper. I found this image on Canva and I printed it out on a regular printer paper. So I'll be using it in my setup along with some washi tapes and stickers that complements the book cover. Now about the book itself. This book was really popular a couple of years ago and I bought it last year, so it had been sitting on my TBR for a while. I was hesitant to pick it up because my experience with hyped up books has been pretty mixed. Some have lived up to the expectations, but others have been disappointing where I went in expecting a lot and ended up feeling underwhelmed. So I wasn't sure what to expect with this one, but I'm really glad to say that it didn't disappoint. It turned out to be a pretty great read, and I'm so happy that this was my first book of the year. It felt like a great way to kickstart my reading this year. So, Lessons in Chemistry follows Elizabeth Zott, a brilliant chemist in the 1960s who faces constant sexism in her field. An unexpected turn of events leads her to become a host of a cooking show, but she uses the show to revolutionize the way women see themselves and teaching not just recipes but scientific principles and empowerment. So it's a mix of humor, sharp social commentary, and heartfelt moments. And it was a really compelling read, in my opinion. It was such an engaging read, and I found it really hard to put it down. Like, it took me about a week to finish it, but that was only because I had other things to do. I couldn't just sit and read all the time. But whenever I had the chance, I kept wanting to come back to it because the writing was really entertaining. One of the things I really loved about this book was the characters, especially the supporting characters. They were really well written and I loved most of them. And of course, I have to mention 630. 630 is the dog. It's Elizabeth's dog in the book. I absolutely adored him, and I love that we got parts of the story from his point of view. That was such a unique and lovely touch. That being said, there were a few aspects that felt a bit over the top to me as well. Like some of the negative characters behaved in an almost cartoonishly awful way. I think that was intentional, but at times it felt a bit too unrealistic to me. Oh, maybe I'm being ignorant and there are actually people out there who are outlandishly awful. I don't know. Either way, it didn't really bother me to take away from my enjoyment of the book, so it's okay. However, one thing that did bother me was the repeated focus on Elizabeth's looks. I get that she's meant to be an attractive character, and that's established early on, but I don't think it is needed to be emphasized so much throughout the book. I mean, I feel like even if she hadn't been conventionally attractive, the core of the story wouldn't have changed. So that part felt a bit unnecessary to me. Also, towards the end of the book, things wrapped up in a way that felt a bit too neat. Like every single character who had ever been involved in Elizabeth's life somehow came back for closure. That felt slightly unrealistic to me, but again, I wasn't necessarily looking for hyper realism in this book, so it didn't bother me too much. These are all really minor complaints because despite all this, I ended up giving this book a full 5-star rating. I did debate between a 4.5 star and 5-star rating, and ultimately, the book was just so enjoyable and engaging that I felt it deserved a full 5 star. Like I mentioned earlier, I was completely hooked from the start, and I only put it down when I absolutely had to. So, if I had the time, I could have just easily read this in one sitting. And I also think the fact that this was my first read of the year played a role in my rating. Like, I was in a very good mood, looking forward to some great books, and this one really delivered. So, that might have influenced my decision to round it up to a 5 star. Overall, I would say it was a great way to start my reading journey this year, and I'm really happy with it. The next book I read in January was Illumine by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. It is part of the Illumine File series, and it is the first book in that series. So for the decoration on the page, I am going with the colors from the book again. The cover has a mix of colors orange and yellow, and that's what I'm going to use for the decorations. I have picked out some washi tape stickers and other ephemera from my collection that matches this color scheme. So I'm going to use those elements here. As for the book, as I mentioned, it is the first in the series. It's a sci-fi novel set in a futuristic world following two teenagers, Katie and Ezra, whose lives are upended when their planet is attacked. And as they escape to separate spaceship, they soon realize that survival isn't as simple as it seems. So then the story unfolds from there throughout a collection of documents, reports, and transcripts related to these events. I have mixed feelings about this one. The book is told in a very unique format. It is presented through case files, transcripts, emails, surveillance footage summaries, and other documents rather than a traditional narrative. And I listened to the audiobook thinking this format would translate well, but now I'm not sure if that was the best choice. Like, part of the story was engaging, but at times it also became confusing, especially towards the end. Like, I really struggled to keep up with certain events, and some things felt muddled in my mind. I'm still unsure whether it was because of the audiobook format or just the way the story was told. I didn't mind the main characters, they were fine to me, but I wasn't a big fan of how some of the side characters were written. They felt too similar, almost like they were created using the same mold, making it hard to distinguish between them. Not all side characters had this issue, but it was noticeable enough to bother me. Overall, I didn't hate this book, but I didn't love it either. It felt somewhere in the middle for me. There were moments I really enjoyed, and the premise is strong enough to make me want to continue the series. So I am curious to see how the story develops in the next book. So I really hope the clarity and pacing improve in that. So in the end, I gave this book a 3-star rating, which wasn't that bad in my opinion. The next book I read was Do Not Disturb by Frida McFadden. I didn't plan this one, it's just the order in which I read them, but this book cover has brown and yellow tones, which kind of happens to go well with the theme I use for Illumine on the opposite page. It was a happy accident. So for this page, I am going with brown and yellow decorations, mostly focusing on the brown. As for the book, it is a thriller about a woman caught in a dangerous situation with secrets and twists unfolding along the way. I can't say anything without spoiling the book, so I'm not going to say anything else about the plot. I'll just talk about my feelings about the book. So, I have read a few books by this author before, so I know the type of stories she tells and the style of her writing. So, I went into this book knowing exactly what type of book this was going to be. I knew it was not going to be anything profound or a groundbreaking read, and I was perfectly fine with that. I picked up this book only for the thrill and suspense, and it delivered exactly that. So, I think as a mystery thriller, it definitely served its purpose well enough. It wasn't an exceptional read, but it wasn't bad either. My main expectation was an engaging storyline with some plot twist, and the book delivered it. There were two major plot twists. I'm not going to spoil it here. I saw one of the plot twists coming. I could predict that early on, but the other one caught me off guard. And I did enjoy that. I mean, to me, that is the point of reading thrillers like this, like trying to guess the mystery and getting surprised by the plot twist. So, overall, this was an okay read. It didn't blow me away, but it gave me exactly what I was looking for, a quick, entertaining thriller. So, no complaints there. And I gave this book a 3-star rating. The next book I read was Iona Iverson's Rule for Commuting by Claire Poley. I think this book is also titled People on Platform Number 5 in some editions. For decorating the spread, I am once again going with the colors from the book cover. I'm using red and yellow washi tape here, and later I'll be adding some blue, yellow and red stickers to tie everything together. I absolutely love this book. This is actually my second read from this author. I read The Authenticity Project back in 2023, and it was one of my favorite books that year. And I absolutely recommend that book as well, by the way. So, ever since I wanted to check out more of her works, but with my ever growing TBR, it took me almost 2 years to finally pick this one up. As for the book, it is a heartwarming story about a group of strangers who cross paths during their daily commute. At the center of all this is Iona Iverson, a bold, witty, and effortlessly charismatic 60-year-old woman who refuses to be ignored. So, over time, their lives become unexpectedly connected, showing how small moments of kindness can create meaningful relationships. So, I really enjoyed this book, especially the writing. I think I might have found a new favorite author because I love how the author explores the found family trope. It's one of my favorite tropes, by the way. I could see some parallels between this book and the Authenticity Project. Both stories revolve around the found family theme, featuring older main characters and have this element of characters rediscovering themselves in the modern world, especially with the influence of social media. But even with those similarities, I think both books are telling very different stories. And I really enjoyed the author's writing style as well. It's really engaging, thoughtful, and full of warmth. There is something distinct about her stories. Like, they are not loud or overly dramatic, but they have this quiet, compelling charm that's hard to put into words. It's something I really appreciate about her books. For me, the standout character was definitely Iona. She is such a force to be reckoned with, the kind of person who commands attention just by being herself. I absolutely adored her character, and honestly, I hope to be someone like that when I reach that stage of my life. She even reminded me of my own grandmother. She's 75, turning 76 this year, and still killing it, in my opinion. So, seeing glimpses of that familiarity in such a vibrant, strong character like Iona made the book even more special to me. I also appreciated how the characters spanned across different age groups, like from a high school teenager to a 60-year-old woman and everything in between. It's not something I see often in most of the popular books I read, so that felt really refreshing. The story itself is very simple and smooth. No high stake drama, no big plot twist, just a warm, uplifting journey. I actually really like that aspect of it because it made the story feel more real to me. Overall, this was an uplifting read, and I'm really looking forward to checking out more books from this author. So, I gave this book a 4.5 stars, definitely one of my favorite reads of the year. The next book I read was The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. As for the decorations, I'm going with a black and red theme inspired by the book cover. The book is about a group of retirees solving murders in their retirement home. This premise immediately drew me in, and I had a very high expectations. Now that I have finished it, I have mixed feelings actually. I love the main characters and the setting. The first half of the book was incredibly entertaining for me. I really enjoyed all the main characters, especially the four older retirees with Elizabeth and Joyce standing out as my favorites. And the first half was witty, charming, and thoroughly engaging. I genuinely thought this was going to be one of my favorite reads. But as the story progressed, the second half started to feel weighed down by too many side plots and backstories. Like, I understand that side characters and subplots can add depth, but here some of them felt unnecessary and it distracted from the main mystery. The twist and final reveal were also a bit underwhelming, which was disappointing after such a strong start. Despite these issues, the book still had its enjoyable aspects. The witty writing and the charm of the main characters kept me engaged. I know this is a series and I would like to spend more time with this group, but I don't think I'll be picking up the sequel immediately, maybe sometime later. Overall, I gave this book 3.5 stars, which for me is still a solid read. It was a good read, it just was not my favorite. The next book I read was Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before by Dr. Julie Smith. Deciding on how to decorate this spread was a bit tricky at first because the book cover is mostly white and I didn't think I could pull off a spread with just white. So I decided to use the sticker on the cover as an inspiration. It has pink and purple tones, which led me to choose those colors for the decor. And interestingly, the stickers I'm using in the spread are actually freebies from different purchases, but they just happen to match the theme perfectly. So, just a happy coincidence. Now, about the book itself, this is a self help book. I don't have much experience with self help books or non fiction in general, so I wasn't entirely sure how to evaluate this one. From my perspective, it was an okay read. The book covers a range of interesting topics related to mental health and emotional resilience. Some chapters resonated with me and offered useful advice, but the majority didn't feel particularly relevant to my current situation. So it felt like it wasn't the right fit for me at the moment. That's not to say the book was bad. On the contrary, it seems like a solid resource for the right audience. It just wasn't what I needed at this moment. Overall, I think it is a well written book, but my personal experience with it was a bit lukewarm due to timing and relevance. I might revisit it later to see if it connects with me more in the future. For now, I'm giving it a 3.5 stars. The next book I read was 100 by Megan Spooner. This book is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, which was my favorite story as a child. So I was really excited to see how this version would turn out. For the decor, I decided to go with the green theme that matches the book cover, but I think it also fits thematically. It represents the enchanting forest, the greenery, and the overall magical atmosphere of the story as well. Anyway, the story follows Eva, who grew up hunting with her father before stepping into a more refined, civilized role in the society. But when the circumstances force her back into the wilderness, she rediscovers her skills and eventually crosses path with the beast, who we know is a cursed man. So, while the outline of the story is familiar, the way the author presents it make it feel fresh. One thing I really appreciated was that the book wasn't romance heavy. There was no unnecessary spice or forced tension. Instead, the focus was on the actual bond between Eva and the beast. I know that might not work for everyone, but for me, it was a huge plus. The setting was another highlight. The story has a medieval Russia inspired backdrop with vivid forest descriptions and an eerie yet magical fairy tale atmosphere, and plenty of folklore elements that added so much depth. It really felt very immersive, like I was right there, living inside the fairy tale. I also loved how the supporting characters were written, especially Eva's sisters. So, in the classic tale, Beauty's sisters are often portrayed as selfish or mean characters, but here they were genuinely kind and supportive. They were very different from Eva. They fit into the society's expectations in ways Eva never could. But there was no resentment or negativity between them. They understood her even if they didn't share her desires, and they always had her back. I really appreciated that. I don't enjoy stories where women are pitted against each other just because they want different things from life. Here, that wasn't the case, and I found it really refreshing. Another difference from the original tale was the second male lead. Typically, the other male character in Beauty and the Beast adaptations tend to be the villain, the arrogant suitor, or the controlling figure. But here, he actually was a genuinely good guy, and I was really rooting for him. For most of the book, I was completely hooked, but towards the end, the story dragged a little for me. It wasn't bad. I knew how it was going to end since this is a retelling, but I found myself slightly bored in the last section. There were also some cringy elements, especially the way Beast addressed Eva as Beauty. So, in this world, people have traditional names and personal names, and Beauty was a name given to Eva at birth, but no one actually called her that except her father. But then the Beast started calling her Beauty too, and for some reason, it just felt off, a little too on the nose. It didn't ruin the book for me, but I could have done without that detail. Overall, this was a great read. Even though the last part didn't completely hold my interest, I still really enjoyed the book as a whole, and I rated it a 3.5 star. The next book I read was The Tempest of Tea by Hafsa Faisal. So for the decor, the book cover has something like a bluish and pinkish shades. They're not exactly blue and pink, but something close to that. So I based my choice of stickers and washi tape on those colors. Now about the book, the story follows Aarti Casimir and her brother Jin, who together runs Spindrift, which is a tea house by day and an illegal blood house for vampires by night. So when Spindrift is threatened, they are forced to pull off a haste to save it. So that's the main premise. This book clearly draws inspiration from Six of Crows, though in my opinion it doesn't quite reach that level of brilliance. One of the strongest aspects in the book is the atmosphere. Spindrift is vividly described, and the backdrop of colonization adds a very interesting depth to the story. So, Aarti is originally from a colonized land resembling modern day Sri Lanka. She's an outcast who made her own space and power among the misfits, which was compelling, but in my opinion, the execution really falters. Because Aarti is repeatedly described as a clever and cunning person, but her actions don't always reflect that. Like, we are told she's clever and cunning, but we never see that actually happening. In contrast, the side characters, especially Jin and Flick, stood out more to me. And one particular annoyance for me was the excessive repetition of mentioning Aarti's mother's red sari. I don't know if that bothered anyone else. I didn't see anyone else mentioning this, but its initial symbolism made sense to me, but its constant mention became frustrating, especially when Aarti wears a sari during an important event in the book, and the repeated references, like 4 or 5 times within a single paragraph, that really felt excessive and distracting. Overall, it was an okay read. The concept and setting were intriguing, but something about the storytelling kept me from fully immersing in it. I know there is a sequel coming out this year, and I'll probably pick it up eventually, but honestly, I'm in no rush. And at the end, I rated this book a 3.5 star, which is not bad, I think. The last book I read for January was The House on Whisper Sand by Parek O'Donnell. For the decor, I focused on the blue tones from the book cover. I ended up using stickers from the same pack as the ones I use for A Tempest of Tea in the opposite page. So the two pages have similar feel, but while the Tempest of Tea spread leans more into the pink shades, I tried to make this one more blue toned. Now on to the book. This is a historical mystery set in 1800s London, following a series of missing girls who all disappeared under similar circumstances. There is also the mysterious death of a seamstress, which seemed to be connected to this case. So the story unfolds through three main characters: uh, Inspector Cutter, the detective on the case; Gideon Bliss, a Cambridge dropout searching for one of the missing girl who he is in love with; and Octavia Hillington, who's a young journalist who's tired of being assigned woman issues and eager for a bigger story. So, honestly, this book was a disappointment. The blurb made it seems like an exciting investigative thriller with supernatural elements and a dynamic trio working together, but it never really delivered. The pacing was too slow. It really could have made use of more editing, and the story lacked tension and suspense, which I expected from a book in this genre. Also, the plot felt all over the place. There were no plot twists at all, and even the reveals at the end weren't that exciting. Also, I still don't understand the significance of the title. Yes, the house appears towards the end and the climax happens there, but it doesn't feel central enough to justify naming the book after it. The only saving grace for me was Inspector Cutter. I genuinely liked him. He was a fun character to read. But that's about it. Aside from that, the book just wasn't for me. I ended up giving it a 2.5 stars, which I think is quite generous. That was the last book I read in January. This is my first time creating a spread for every book I read. I used to only do this for a few books in my previous journals, but I'm really happy with how most of these spreads turned out, and I'm excited to keep this up throughout the year. Now, let's do a quick flip through. So that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to see more journaling content, be sure to check out my channel and don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.